Welcome back to the BookEnds YouTube channel. I'm James McGowan.
Hi, I'm Jessica Faust.
We are literary agents who have taken our popular blog to YouTube to discuss all things publishing. And today we're talking about working in publishing.
Yeah, so I read this article recently about how many job candidates are overqualified for the jobs they're taking. And it made me think of being a publishing assistant and how entry-level publishing is at the assistant level. The best entry-level publishing, I think. And by the best, I mean you can enter publishing as a full-time agent, but typically that's commission-based. So to receive a salary in this business, whether you're working for a publishing house or an agency, you're usually starting off as an assistant. And, you know, the truth is, I would imagine most people who've started off as an assistant, me included, with a college education, are a bit overqualified to spend their days doing things like filing. I actually just had to take a typing test to get my first. Yeah. The first thing you had to do back in the day was you went into HR for your interview and they shoved you back into this little tiny room of typewriters and you had a full on take it. Oh no, it wasn't a typewriter. It was a computer with a typing test on it.
Well, thank you for not making me do that.
It was crazy. But I think that, unfortunately, there is a fair amount of dissatisfaction when people start their jobs in publishing and, you know, they take the job knowing it's an assistant position, but I don't think many really realize what that entails and feel sort of very quickly frustrated and dissatisfied that they are not, and please tell me if I'm wrong, but not starting out their career editing books or representing authors.
Yeah, I mean, I do quickly want to at least make note that I think we're kind of coming at this conversation separate from the discussions right now about overwork and salary. Like, I think that's a separate conversation to me. And I think what we're really talking about is just the experience one can get as an assistant. But you're right. I think every person, me included, right, coming into publishing, you're like, ooh, I'm going to start my first day. I'm going to edit a book. I'm going to do all of that. And I think we're coming from like sort of the level of progression that it takes to get into the bookmaking. But yeah, everybody sort of comes into it, right? Like how many people have we interviewed? Interns, everybody, like, we just want to be making books. We do just want to be making books. It's absolutely right.
But I think I did the same thing, right? You're not graduating from college and hoping that you can file.
Yeah, it's true, right? Like publishing is a glamorized industry, right? Like we look at it, and bookmaking, especially people like us who have, reverence for books. So we immediately want to get into it, and we kind of don't have the patience for it. But we kind of want to talk a little bit about why we would be assistants all over again. Like I have just recently become not an assistant, right, within the past 6 months, but I would go back.
And honestly, people, it took some boots to kick to get this to happen.
It took a lot of kicks in the pants. I didn't want to leave my assistant position. I first of all, I love doing that kind of work, but I think that there's an experience you gain as an assistant. I'm speaking from my experience, right? Like my first 5 years at BookEnds, I supported the entire team, but there is not a section of this agency that I don't feel I understand fully and in depth. And
you understand it more than almost anybody else.
Yeah, like I understand how payments are made, all of our social media, like everything that we are doing as an agency, I at least have a basic understanding of contracts. Mm-hmm. I know everybody's list. Like if you rattled off a BookEnds client to me, I can tell you who represents them. But there's something to that I think makes me a better agent. Like I have a full understanding of what we bring to every single client relationship.
Yeah, well, it's funny because when interns and assistants start this job and I tell them that there's filing, less so now because there's so much more electronic, thank goodness. But I always say, read it. When you're doing the filing, read what you're filing. And I remember Kim Leonetti talking about her internship at Berkeley Publishing and how when she was doing the filing, she was pulling out author files and reading the revision letters that they'd received and the contracts and all of that information, and just like it was like a sponge, like just taking it all in and seeing how things work in a way as an assistant that you don't get to do if you start out immediately doing the dream job?
I think that the reason why, I mean, my first job as an intern was the former assistant at BookEnds asked me to do a file catalog. So in my first 2 or 3 weeks of being here, I asked a million questions about contracts, and I knew your client list like the back of my hand by the end of it. But I also think that there's like, when you're coming in new, you have more, I don't know, I guess like you're less afraid to ask a question, or you should be less afraid
Yeah.
to ask a question. If I was coming in as an agent, I would probably feel like I should probably know this. And as an intern, you have the freedom to know nothing and be okay with knowing nothing.
Right.
Or an assistant as well, not just an intern.
But I also think if your personality is to be a bit of an observer and a listener, starting out as an assistant can be a phenomenal experience because you're trafficking everything for the person you're working for, and eventually what they're looking to do is pass some of that stuff off to you.
Right.
So you're seeing all the different ways they interact with authors, and how to handle difficult authors, and how to handle easy authors, and how to give revision notes that um, really convey what you want to say while also being kind and warm and fuzzy,
Right.
which I think is really hard to do without the perspective of all of those different things. And it's not one revision letter. It's not like if I said, oh, here's an example of a revision letter. It's seeing all of them that
And
does that.
the truth is too, like there are books on your list from before I was taking on clients. Even when I had my own clients, there are books on your list that I like. Some of them are probably right over here that I have such a reverence for because I did do work on them. Right, like there were books that sure I wasn't the agent on them, but I'm like if the author has recognized me in the acknowledgement. So even as an assistant,
Yeah.
you get that like fulfilling sense of working on books because you are working on books in a way. Like the book would not be made if you weren't doing some of that backhand work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember I had one client, I still have this client, who we worked on the revisions together. And so you got to see my insights, and I got to see yours, but maybe things that the other person didn't pick up on. And I
Right.
think it's similar for an author to be in a critique group, to have that experience of seeing what people are saying about somebody else's book and then looking at your own work to see how that feedback might fit your work. Well, as an agent and somebody who gives revisions and edits, it's really valuable for me to have seen over the course of my career how other people give their feedback and what feedback they give, because then I can look at myself when I do edits and know what my blind spots might be,
Yeah.
because I would miss those things.
Well, how many times too do I find myself I phrase that just like Jessica would phrase it, where somebody at Bookends would be like, "I feel like I'm talking to Jessica." I was like, "We've worked so closely for 5 years that
Yeah.
you do learn how another agent works, right? Like you take on a lot of that."
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I mean, to this day, so many years later, I mean, Bookends is almost 25 years old. So I've been out of the assistant job for a super long time. And there is still so much about that experience for me that I, to this day, look back on when negotiating contracts. When I would negotiate contracts in those days, I wasn't left to my own. I had people guiding me through it. And I also got to watch how they negotiated contracts. And I was an editor, so I was in a different position. But I also, because I was negotiating, got to see how different agents negotiated. And that really helped me to see
Yeah.
who I want to be as a negotiator and an agent.
Yeah, especially as an agency grows or is already a bigger agency, because you're working on all of their lists too, you can see like what works for this person or right, like Kim does a lot of romance. What is Kim looking for in romance? And Jessica, you do more mystery and upmarket stuff. So you get like a fuller experience of every genre, every
Mhm.
age group. And that also helps you as an assistant decide where do I want to go? Like where do I see myself fitting in here?
I also think there is one similarity, well, more than one, but there is a real similarity between the two of us that is probably plays into why we both say I would go back and do it all over again. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't start my career off differently. And because we are both question askers and initiators.
Annoyingly
So
so.
So, I mean, James would come up to me on the regular and say, so I have an idea. What if we do this? And I think, I was the same way as an assistant. I was always looking for new ideas and new ways to do things and new ways to challenge myself. So I wasn't just stuck in the trenches of being an assistant. I actually found ways to find satisfaction in my job and excitement, but that also got me recognized by other people.
That's true. I didn't think of that because it wasn't like we were in the slog of doing other people's work because we took ownership over it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also,
And not only do we take ownership of the other people's work per se, but we found ways to create our own in a way that that satisfied our professional dreams.
yeah, I didn't think of that at all.
But you would always, you were always like, can I read that? And then, the way you were always asking for more made me very aware of how easy it was to pass stuff off to you.
And
If I have an
the
assistant
transition.
who wasn't asking, then it wouldn't necessarily dawn on me like, do you want to do these revisions with me?
Yeah, but also the tradition, not the tradition, the transition too. Like, I'm sure you're a lot more comfortable with me taking on clients because you've seen that sort of initiative and do that kind of work. But if somebody who is not doing that and sort of taking control of the workload that they do have, it
Yeah.
is a bit different of like, can you handle a client list? Can you handle, your own creative work too? But
Also
also,
your questions.
oh, I ask a ton of questions.
But
Yeah.
that, for me, on my end, built a ton of confidence in you because I knew that if you were taking on new clients and you didn't feel like you were ready or something, you weren't sure about something, you were going to come with a question. You weren't just going to go headlong into, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. I'm just going to figure it out. And then I was going to have to go clean something up. That didn't happen. It was, so because you asked questions, I knew what you knew.
Right.
And I knew what you were capable of, but I also knew when you were nervous about something that a conversation would be had. And that was huge for me in trusting you.
Right. So what this 5-year performance review is telling you, because that's what that just turned into. I appreciate it all. That's what that turned into. No, but really, I think what we're trying to say is if you have the opportunity to start in this industry as an assistant, it's one that's worth taking as long as you are being fairly compensated and your workload is manageable, of course. But it's one worth taking because the intimate level of knowledge that you will get of the whole publishing ecosystem
Everything.
is honestly, there's nothing like it. And it's very difficult to gain that knowledge without having this consistent exposure to it.
But also make it the job you want it to be. Don't let, we sort of try to say this and everything, but you will go into a somewhat predefined job, but then as you go, you can define how you want that job to look and still get the task done that other people expect of you.
Right.
And I would do it all over again.
Me too. Well, thank you for watching. For those looking to get into publishing, especially as an agent, we hope that this was helpful, but also as an editor or publicity and marketing assistant as well. I think it relates to all three fields. But we hope this was helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you back here next time.
Bye.